Hey guys, welcome to Sonic Discovery. I am your host, David Correa. On this episode, we have 3 strong albums to talk about from Hop Along, Saba, and Wye Oak. Hey guys, thanks so much for clicking play on the episode. If you're not familiar with what we do here in Sonic Discovery, I go through different albums that have come out throughout the weeks, and I pick 3 of them, and I discuss them on this show. So hopefully, from my reviews, you can either say, good thing I didn't give that a listen, or, hey, you know what, that actually sounds pretty good. I may want to check that out. And that's really the purpose. I want to encourage you guys to discover something new. And opening up this episode, we are going to be talking about the newest release from the Philly band Hop Along. This is called Bark Your Head Off, Dog. This is album number 4 for the band. And I actually found out that the band started off as a solo project of singer and guitarist Francis Queenan. And now, they fleshed out into a full band. This is an indie rock band, but especially on this release, the music is very fluid. Like, it almost comes across as like a jazz record. Not that it sounds like jazz, but it doesn't really follow the structure of a normal rock record. Here, she does a lot of interesting things vocally with her voice, which can have like a raspy quality at times. But others, she takes these like big leaps where she just kind of hits different notes. And this also doesn't follow the proper format of like verse, chorus, bridge, things like that. So that's actually one of the things that makes this album really interesting. We're going to start things off with the opening track and lead single, How Simple. This is a nice song. It has a nice indie rock sound, but also a lot of changes in the music, like I mentioned before. But they all still kind of connect to make a real exceptional track on this record. It also has a really catchy chorus. And on here, she's talking about, we will eventually find out what life has in store, but unfortunately, she's not going to be doing it with this other person. Somewhere a Judge, again, has a very looseness feel to the composition, but here again, we get a really catchy, distinct melody on the chorus, real intricate guitar work too, and some nice imagery being brought through on the lyrics. How You Got Your Limp is an acoustic track with some real interesting string arrangements going on. And here she's telling the story of a professor having a drunken rant inside of a bar. Not Able follows the acoustic sound and intricate string work of the track before. The minor notes used on the strings here really give the track an eeriness on the chorus. And we have a little shift on the last section that is brought on by some more intricate guitar work. The Fox in Motion has a looseness to the music, and here her voice also doesn't really follow a distinct melody. This is also the one where she kind of does some giant leaps with the notes she takes. And also here the chorus has a real catchy, sunny moment. And later on, we have some nice little guitar work that bursts through towards the end. One that suits me is another one where her voice just kind of takes these giant leaps sometimes, and part of the chorus here shifts into a very catchy territory. Here she's telling the story of men that build terrible weapons and have to live with this for the rest of their lives. There's a nice little gritty guitar moment that happens a little bit towards the end as the song comes to a fade. What the Writer Meant has some intricate guitar work and some constant shifts in the music as she poses the question, are we shaped by specific moments in our lives? And I'd have to say, yeah. There's probably a lot of things that happen in your past that end up shaping how you end up doing in life. Look of Love starts off with a lo-fi acoustic sound as it then shifts into a more electric one around 145. Here, the chorus is a little bit unconventional, but when it hits its stride, it probably has one of the catchiest moments on the album, as she repeats the line, "You've overgrown with a look of love." I was especially fond of the last closing section on this song. And then the album closes with Prior Things, which opens up with these string work that become a strong fixture of this track with these really quick bowed movements. They create a real earworm on the track too. I really do like the rhythm section here with the bass groove and the organ and the guitar that are added on the chorus. Overall, I really enjoyed listening to this album. It was a little hard to really dissect a lot of the lyrics, so I wasn't really sure what she was talking about most of the time, but I really like the fact that this album challenged me. You know, I'm usually someone that likes things a certain way, to follow a certain format, and this one just kind of breaks those rules. The chorus would come when I didn't expect it, and it would just, the shift to it would be so sudden, and then it would just fall out of it very quickly into something very different. Just the music itself takes a lot of different left turns, and I really enjoyed that. This is going to get a score of an 8 out of 10 from me. So if you're interested in checking out some indie rock that doesn't really follow convention, then I recommend you checking out this release. Next up for review, we have the second release from Chicago rapper Saba. This is called Care for Me. Now, I'm not familiar with Saba myself, but I know that he has done work with Chance the Rapper and No Name, who are both also from Chicago. Chance actually makes an appearance on this album. And on here, we get production that is very smooth, sometimes almost having a jazzy-like quality with live instrumentation. And on topics, he jumps all over the place, but a topic that he keeps coming back to is the murder of his cousin, John Walt. They wrote music together, and they kind of get started in the music industry at the same time. And he was murdered, and so that really, really affected him before the release of his debut album. And he touches upon that incident many times on this album. We're going to start off the album at the top with the opening track, Busy/Sirens. This has more of a soulful sound to the production, as he's talking about dealing with a lot of stuff. Depression, and really keeping himself busy with creating music. But that also kind of creates a rift with the people that are close to him, and him wanting to really stay in touch. He's having a hard time doing that, and also doesn't want to start any kind of new relationships because he doesn't need someone new to miss. And then the track segues into the second part, Sirens, which has more of a bounce to the beat, as he's talking about his supposed guiltiness of basically just being black, and goes through different experiences of what it's like to be a black man growing up in the US. Broken Girls is another soulful track, as he's talking about trying to find temporary fulfillment, but with the wrong girls. I like how his flow changes on this track, and it's actually something that he does constantly throughout this album. Life opens up with a more laid-back sound, as we have a great upright bass over the beat, and then it switches into something a lot more aggressive, as he's talking about those that are close to him that have lost out to life. Calligraphy brings us back to a more soulful sound with a prominent piano line, as he's talking about not running away from life, but instead using all these things to fuel his music. On Fighter, he talks about specific moments in which he's had to either fight or argue with others around him, and how he's really done with that. The outro to this track is one of those that's really interesting, where there's some pitch shifting going on his vocals. I love the live sound of the production on the next track, Smile, as we get something that's a bit more lighthearted. He's talking about, different memories he has as growing up as a kid, and eventually he thinks of moving down south because that's where his family originates from. Log Out is a single from the album, and this features Chance the Rapper, and it's a fairly short track as they're talking about the culture's dependency on social media. And, they depend on that instead of connecting with people that are right in front of you. I love the production on the next track, Great, as it gives us more of a jazzy quality, and that becomes very clear, especially on the outro. Here he talks about the industry and how they really just want you to have a hot track that you can play in the clubs, and he's more interested in creating stuff that's a lot more honest. Prom/King is a 7-minute track in which, first starts off very relaxed, and he's talking about different stories with him and his cousin, about them finding out they live really close to each other without really knowing, and them going to prom. And on the second half, it switches to something much more aggressive with very prominent pushing drums as he's talking about the events that led up to murder. And then the album closes with the soulful track, Heaven All Around Me, in which he's taking the perspective of someone who's making their way up to heaven. And this has the line, no, I can't feel pain, but I can see the stars. No, I ain't leave in vain, but I know we with God. Overall, I was a big fan of this album. I was a big fan of the production. I really liked his flow, where it, kind of shifted all over the place. Sometimes it was a little bit more slower and relaxed, and other times it was a lot more energetic or aggressive. And I also liked that he touched on a lot of different topics throughout only 40 minutes worth of music. This is going to get a score of an 8.5 out of 10 from me. So if you're a fan of more conscious hip hop, then I highly recommend you check this out. And now for our last album, we'll be talking about the newest from Wye Oak. This is called The Louder I Call, The Faster It Runs. Now this is a group that's new to me. I've never really checked them out. They are a duo from Baltimore, and they have an indie pop sound, but also incorporate elements here of indie rock and synth pop. The duo is comprised of Andy Talk and Jen Wasner, and I feel like they play everything. She sings and plays guitar and bass, and he plays drums and keyboards. And I think he does them at the same time. He plays drums with his feet and with one of his hands, and on the other he's playing the keys. That sounds crazy to me. And it's funny that I mentioned instruments because the opening track is actually just called Tuning. It's about 40 seconds long, and it has them tuning all the different instruments that we're about to hear on this album. And that leads into the opening track, which is called The Instrument. And this has an up-tempo beat incorporating jangly guitars, arpeggiated synths, and these squalls that are really prominent on the chorus. As she's talking about the people that only focus on the outward appearance and not really on the inner self. The next is the leading single and title track on the album. This one opens up with a long synth intro and has an overall much grander sound. And we even get a little instrumental outro out of it too. Here, she's talking about the more you move closer to something, the further it seems to get away from you. Lifer gives us a lighter sound, but a real interesting beat too. This one also has a pretty huge guitar solo that bursts through after the second chorus. On here, she's saying to not be comfortable with life and always want more from it. It Was Not Natural has a more prominent bass groove and also is led in by a piano progression, and the vocals on here are much more open that lead us in to this big sounding chorus. On here, she sounded a lot to me like Sarah McLachlan, and she's talking about learning to make sense of the chaos around us. Symmetry opens up with quick synth chords and this odd timing as it builds up to this big chorus, which has a more propelling sound. This one is about those that choose the easier route, although it's a little bit more brainless. Say Hello is propelled by a quick beat, buzzing guitars, and light synths, as it has a much more open sound with instrumental breaks afterwards. Here she's talking about how insignificant it all seems when you're seeing things from a plane. You of all people has a softer, more open sound with really great vocals on the chorus. It had a nice simplicity to it as well. Here she talks about, should we listen to the chemicals going on in our bodies? Are they trying to tell us something a little bit more significant? Maybe. Join is a softer track that is led in by the guitar. It has some synths and a drum machine, as she's talking about clearing your head when you're held up with nothing but negative thoughts. Overall, I was happy with this release. It didn't really give me anything different that I hadn't heard before, but I liked the instrumentation on the album, and I really liked the vocal from the lead singer. Also, the lyrics here were pretty easy to follow. This is going to get a score of a 7 out of 10 from me. So if you're interested in checking out a good indie pop release, then you can't go wrong with listening to this. Well guys, thanks so much for tuning in to this latest episode. If you have any comments or suggestions, make sure to leave those at the bottom. If you have any music or any albums you want me to listen to, put those down there as well. And make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. On the next episode, I'll be looking to talk about the new release from Tinashe, so be on the lookout for that.